Today, we're at Wimbledon School of English talking to teachers about new teaching techniques.
Well, the quickest way and the best way in this school is we've got a very active development training schedule that we have in the school. And we have meetings more or less every month.
We have some conferences that we're allowed to, or encouraged to go to.
I think a lot of it's got to do with staying focused on what's developing in the field by paying attention to the journals that come out, a lot of the online content and in-house training. We're very lucky here, we get a lot of in-house training, and anyone who goes to any conference comes back with any new ideas or concepts that they've heard about that really tickled them.
Well, I think obviously we use technology in the classroom to an extent, but things like blended learning and flipped classrooms and those kind of terms, they're thrown around a lot at conferences and they're talked about a lot in terms of theory, but in the classroom itself, I don't think they're used as much as perhaps people would like.
One of my colleagues actually mentioned that blended learning, or rather the flipped classroom, actually is very similar to just telling students to do homework in a textbook and then the next day, or rather read the introduction and then do the exercises in class. Now, the difference between that and any flipped classroom learning that we do nowadays is that they can repeat it in a video format and you can still interact with students while they're at home. So we actually use things like Edmodo or Google Drive to be able to interact with students in that way. So uploading things and asking them to do tasks when they're at home is a very good way of doing it, but also exposure to the ideas. So investigation happens normally at home, setting tasks that we share in these online environments. And then the blended learning comes in, that we'll actually use the technology in class. For example, making students record themselves with speaking presentations and then uploading corrections of this or the transcript of this, just simple transcriptions of their spoken presentations is a very, very powerful tool.
I've tried flipped learning a couple of times, which I think can be very useful. I think it can be most useful when you're trying to go a little bit deeper and demand higher. But I think you do need to be judicial with your use. So you need to select a class that will go away and do the homework, even if they're trying to puzzle through whatever the instructions are themselves personally. So I think one of the benefits is if they do it and you come back, then you've got a whole hour to dig that little bit deeper to help them with their understanding.
Yeah, I do, sometimes. Especially things that have come up during the teacher development sessions. I might try out an activity or a new way of approaching something.
Well, I'm a big fan of Scott Thornbury because when he writes his books, he writes books that are very clear, and he teaches techniques that are about inductive learning, whereby the students find out the information themselves, and his books are written the same way. So when you find out about how to teach for example, conditionals, you learn by an inductive process as well.
Well, one example I think, which I took from the Delta, was dogme method, which basically means going into the classroom without anything, which is nice if you've not been able to prepare something the night before perhaps, or the lesson that you planned to do kind of went out the window for some reason, and then you just use the student's own language as the basis for the lesson, and yeah, that always works quite well, and I think gives you a bit of confidence as a teacher.
A good example of this is perhaps in the CELTA, we're taught PPP, the presentation, practice, production kind of methodology. Then in the diploma comes around that gets thrown out. Now doing a master's degree, reading a gentleman named Zoltan Dornier brings back the significance of the presentation, practice, production, having declarative information and then getting students to proceduralize it piece by piece, and actually going back to what I thought was a simple thing. Well, it would be one example of having moved away from something for a large portion of my teaching career, probably about 7 years out of the 11, I haven't used that model. And now I've recently gone back to it.
So I've been working on different memory techniques. I studied theatre, so I've been using sort of acting techniques for studying vocabulary and trying to eliminate common errors, sort of ingrained errors. And using memory, I think, really encourages students to think about what they can do themselves in order to enhance their sort of learning.